When we've touched on abuse, and I think as someone who's not from a legal background, um, and some of the things that I saw at boarding school, coming through as a child, and countless stories we hear at Seen and Heard from the abuse survivors who come and talk to us about their stories. Um, Many, because it was so normalized, a lot of this abuse within the school structure, within the institution, like you say, special privileges, they were everywhere, and certain masters, certain instructors, and would run these clubs that were very select, and there would be extra time away from the dorms, or there would be trips, or there would be tea and biscuits and all this sort of stuff. If you were to get into small groups with some of these people, um, a lot of people are going to ask, well, what even is abuse? So if someone wanted to pursue a conversation with a law firm, with a legal avenue, uh, sexual, verbal, physical, um, it's quite complex for a lot of people to know. Okay, well, what actually is abuse? So could you help me understand that a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fair. It's a difficult area, to be frank. And when most people talk about abuse, they're talking about childhood sexual abuse from a teacher to a pupil, can also involve peer-on-peer abuse. So an older pupil to a younger pupil, and the school being aware or should have been aware that this was a risk and this was happening and didn't act appropriately. It can also involve racial abuse as well. I've dealt with a number of racial abuse cases, alleged racial abuse cases at Chelsea Football Club. It can involve emotional and verbal abuse, which again we're acting on currently. So alleged body shaming at a number of different ballet schools, which they are full-time boarders. Um, it can include physical abuse. Again, the problem which we've got in boarding schools is that it was so commonplace, being smacked and hit, that it's hard sometimes to distinguish what was a typical example of corporal punishment and what was a beating. And some of the examples which we have heard of and spoken to survivors about, being smacked is one thing, being thrown down the stairs, thrown against radiators, having your head smashed against walls. That isn't corporal punishment. That isn't being smacked with a slip or a belt or anything else. It is hard to distinguish, and often abuse survivors, sometimes from self-preservation, will not acknowledge that something to be abuse. We've had a couple of cases, well, a number of cases whereby you are speaking to someone, they're talking about sexual abuse, and then half an hour later they say, "Oh, by the way, yeah, this happened to me." Quite extreme physical abuse, but they don't consider it to be abuse because it was so normal. And that's the problem. Everyone's normal is their own normal, and I appreciate that. But in boarding school, the stuff people see and hear and then experience themselves, often lots of things are let go, and it's wrong. It's entirely wrong. Obviously, post 99, you can't smack a child, so it's much easier to distinguish, why are you being hit by a teacher. Pre 99, there's problems, and the same as the discrepancies. So why are you being smacked for speaking at night? What's the reasonable punishment for that? One smack, 10 smacks, 100 smacks, smack with a hand, smacks with a stick? What is reasonable? That's the difficulty with physical assaults, to be totally frank. Um, Predominantly, we're looking towards sexual abuse because it's quite clearly wrong. Things like emotional abuse, racial abuse, body shaming, again, are cases which we are working on and succeeding on to prove that this is abuse. But I think that abuse in the eyes of the law and abuse in the eyes of a layperson are very different. And I think any action which causes you trauma, discomfort, upset, distress, um, is abuse. That's my view on it.